California's ethnic study requirement on March 18, 2021, State of California Education Department became the first in the 50 states to approve ethnic studies curriculum. And among the 7 lesson plans submitted to the Korean History Education Reform Committee, Korean American experience and race relations or interethnic relations was adopted, and the remaining 6 lessons plans were also reflected as additional materials. Right? The lesson plans that we submitted to the Department of Education is Korean American experiences and interethnic relations, Colonel Young Kim's story, and community struggle, a voice, identity, the Korean American leader Dosan Chang, and Korean American Unity for Independence movement, Korean independence movement in the United States, and Dr. Sammy Lee. And those of you who may not know, he's the first Asian American to win gold medal in Olympic Games in diving in 1948 and in London Olympic, and he defended his championship in 1952 Olympic Games. So he and Colonel Young Kim were born in Los Angeles and grew up together, and so they're one of the key early Korean American leaders. And Korean popular K-pop. So these are the lesson plans we submitted, and all of them were approved. In fact, Korean American experiences and interethnic relations, authored by yours truly, it was adopted as one of the lesson plans, and the rest of it is a supplementary materials. So what is ethnic studies? And by the way, I became one of the first PhD in ethnic studies in the nation in 1990. I received one of the first PhD from UC Berkeley. Thank you. And in fact, I was one of the first cohorts of the nation's ethnic studies PhD program at UC Berkeley in 1984. So I was one of the first 8 students that were admitted to the ethnic study requirement. So back then, nobody knew what is ethnic studies. Why are you interested in ethnic studies? I was still a recent immigrant from Korea. I came to United States in 1974, so I have been here almost 10 years, but still, I was struggling with my English grammars, English language, whatever. And the Berkeley curriculum was very rigorous. I mean, we were asked to read 5-6 books per class, and I was taking like 5-6 classes per quarter. So it was just a mind-boggling, but somehow I was able to overcome and struggle big time. But anyway, the reason why I was interested in ethnic studies, whereas I originally went to Berkeley majoring in sociology, and I found sociology very boring because we're talking about Kant, Hegel, all these philosophers seem irrelevant to me. I mean, whatever they were talking about has nothing to do with me. And I was struggling with the English language to begin with. Even the native speakers were having a hard time, so we had the TAs trying to explain what Hegel is saying. And so it was a major struggle. But whereas I took Asian American studies and Korean American experience classes, it made a lot of sense to me. It was about me. It was a story about me, my struggle, my parents, my ancestors. So I decided to pursue in Asian American studies at UCLA. And at the time, the master's program in Asian American studies was only offered by UCLA. So by the time I finished my master's degree program, Berkeley announced nation's first PhD program. What a timing. And I was extremely lucky. I was extremely fortunate. So I decided to apply. I mean, in retrospect, I was so stupid. I didn't apply anywhere else. I should have applied someplace else too, right? In case I didn't get in. But I didn't even think about that. What a stupid idea, but fortunately I was accepted. So from there, I've been teaching about ethnic studies since 1992. And by the way, my doctoral dissertation was on Korean Black conflicts in Los Angeles. And 2 years later, LA erupted. So, in retrospect, some people say, I was, calling what's about to come 2 years later, but I didn't. But I didn't know. I knew it could erupt, but not so soon, right? In all of sudden, 1990. Anyway, so ethnic studies, study race and ethnicity in comparative perspective to gain greater multicultural insight and understanding, and critically examine intra-group differences and commonalities in history, culture, racism, and impact of law, social inequalities in contemporary society. I mean, this is kind of boring, but I just going through, analyze conflicts, tensions, building of effective intergroup coalitions and alliances among racially subordinate groups, and prepare students to enter the workforce and function effectively and critically as informed citizens in a diverse multicultural society. And ethnic studies majors should be able to comprehensively describe and analyze the history, function, and ongoing effects of racism in America. So, that's what I, do in introduction of my class in the beginning. And the margins and mainstream, I mean, right now, the Trump administration is a major attack on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And as a result, many universities, including UC, Cal State, lots of nonprofit organizations, their funding's cut in half. So there is a major financial crisis, right? They're cutting funding everywhere. And they're attacking Harvard University of all places, and they are eliminating Department of Education. So, Donald Trump thinks education is useless, right? That's what he thinks. But anyway, the core values and ideals of nation emanate not from the mainstream, but from the margins, among Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, American Indians, women, and gay and lesbians. In their struggle for equality, these groups have helped preserve and advance the principles and ideals of democracy and have thereby made America freer and for all. This is a statement made by my colleague, Gary Okihiro, who wrote a small book called Margins and Mainstream. So I think this sums up. We had American Revolution in 1776. Supposedly, we were all created equal, and yet, American legal system, as Professor Ed Park probably have go over major discriminatory laws throughout 19th and 20th century in America, particularly attacking Asian immigrants. Asian immigrants were not eligible to become citizens until literally 1952 in the case of Korean and Japanese immigrants. And yet, we had the second revolution during 1960s, women's movement, Black Power movement, Yellow Power movement. In their struggles for equality, America went through, and America became truly egalitarian, equal society. That's what he's saying. So we need to have a critical understanding of the values and the struggles of so-called non-white groups. So I'm a firm believer of history, teaching history. And I often tell my students, unless you know your own history, your identity is anchorless. Your foundation is shaky. And you have to have a firm understanding. Until 1960s, however, American textbooks were mostly written by, for, white Americans and by white historian professors. And the contributions of non-whites, Asian Americans, Latinos, African Americans, were not taught in a regular curriculum, despite the history book tend to be like 500 pages long. So that's the reason why the students in 1968, San Francisco State University, students built coalition. Black students, Chicano students, Native students, Asian American students, they went on strike. Students went on strike, right? Why did they go on strike? Because they demanded ethnic studies. The students wanted to learn their own history. They wanted to know about their own history. And it's known as the Third World Strike. It went on several months. And they replaced president of Cal State, San Francisco State University, to, you know who? Do you know who hired them as a new president to combat this Third World student strike? Former Senator Hayakawa, Japanese American senator. And so they wanted to have a puppet, minority president to attack ethnic studies. And they went on strike, and soon Commercial Bay, UC Berkeley students, they also went on strike. And they demanded ethnic studies. And students, at the time, we did not have a PhD in ethnic studies. Remember, I'm the first one. So, who taught these classes? Mostly, community activists, community workers. Many UC Berkeley PhD students, they dropped out and they went to community agencies to serve the community. So they came back and taught their experiences. So the ethnic studies from the beginning is very different from traditional academic discipline, because in ethnic studies, praxis matters. Theory and practice is inseparable. Oftentimes in academia, in university, they're only interested in theories, for the sake of theory. They don't care about how it's practiced in the your own field, right? They only care about theory. Whereas in ethnic studies, we care deeply about how it is practiced, how theory is practiced in real educational setting, for example, a school setting. So that's what in the beginning. So most of the professors and lecturers were community activists, and the lecturers were hired. And so when I went to Berkeley in 1980, they hired some professors, but none of them actually major ethnic studies, but they all came from different disciplines and with PhD, but we had lots of lecturers. And PhD program began in 1984, which became official academic discipline, because now ethnic studies is awarding PhD. So the UC campus, we have Berkeley, San Diego, and Riverside is only 3 universities that grant PhD in ethnic studies today, right? So I'm very proud, and that's one of the reasons why I chose Riverside, because Riverside offered autonomous PhD program, so I decided to go to Riverside as opposed to other campuses. And this is the Daily Cal, and in 1984, that's me right there. Yeah, the ethnic studies now gives doctorates. In 1984, I am still young, right? It's like almost more than 40 years ago, right? Wow. Yeah, it's time flies. Anyway, so I have a fond memory of it. That's late Ron Takaki. He's the key professor who studied whole ethnic studies PhD program. And now we have, Chang and others have helped to establish the inaugural Korean American Studies Conference. We did that in 2022 during the COVID era, but I will explain how this came about later on. And when California State Department of Education announced ethnic studies requirement for all high school students, initially Korean American curriculum was not included. So I remember it was around May 2020. The COVID pandemic just began. So the Korean American community was alarmed. We were very concerned. And I think the Chinese and the Filipino American stories were included, but other stories were not within the Asian American curriculum. So quickly, we formed a task force. And we only had like 3 months to respond. And myself and Sung Kim and Sujio and many others quickly participated, and we submitted 7 lesson plans that you saw. We had to assemble experts, educators quickly, and we had to really right away. We didn't have any time. So we had to submit it within time deadline, right? We didn't have time. So we did that, and we were able to include those 7 lesson plans, actually 1. And also Asian American PISMA, Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association also played a major role. School board members, and they pushed to include stories, not only Korean American stories, Japanese American, Filipino, Asian Indians, and other stories within the Asian American community. Is very diverse, right? We're so diverse. But our primary task was to include, make sure that Korean American stories are included. And I'm borrowing this from Jeff Kim, Dr. Jeff Kim from Anaheim School District, who offered nation's first high school class on Korean American community, Korean American study. I think he offered that class 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago. So he received lots of national coverage and lots of media exposure. But he calls Korean American stories great American story. It's not just a Korean story, Korean American story. It's an American story. Yes, I say, Kona story of Kona Yo Kim, for example. How many of you ever heard of Kona Yo Kim? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, at least 4, 5. That's a huge jump compared to 5 years ago. No one knew, but Kona Yo Kim's story is a great American story, right? We should all know about him. Why I chose to name the research center after him, Yo Kim. It's not just for Korean Americans, it's for all Americans, right? So Korean American story is not just limited to Korean Americans. It's all Americans should know about Korean diaspora, Korean American story, because it's about America. And how do we incorporate Korean American story into curriculum then? And I think one of the easiest way to begin this storytelling is to tell story or interview your parents, your in-laws, your family members, and grandparents, oral history projects, interviewing family members, parents. I think that's the easiest way. There's lots, within Korean American family, there's lots of gap between parents and young generation. younger generation really don't know much about their parents, why they came, what was it like to be Korean immigrant in 1970s and 80s. What does it really mean to be Korean American? And what was it like to be in LA civil unrest in 1992? Right? These are the real story. And we need to narrow the gap between parents and younger generation. And younger generation really don't know about the struggles of the parents. By the same token, immigrant generation don't know much about the younger generation, their struggles in the classroom. But they are dealing with so-called race. Parents have no idea what it's like to go to school in multi-ethnic, multiracial school environment, right? So we need to narrow the gap between younger and older generation. And also, because of that, I authored this. I didn't bring. I should have brought my book, but it's in my car. The 100-page, concise Korean American history. It's called Korean American History. Korean Americans, a concise history. I wrote it. I cut it to 100 pages long. I did that on purpose. So thin, about this thin. It's only like it's a $10 or $15 in Amazon. So anyone can access it, right? It's like a Korean American 101. I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose. So I also translate that into Korean language as well. So it's available both in English and Korean. I think Dr. Jeff Kim used this book as a major text in his classroom. And we also can learn and incorporate about Korean American leaders, heroes and legends. And like a Colonel Young Kim story, for example, or Sammy Lee story. Sammy Lee, what a great story. 1940s, America, or anti-Asian sentiment was so high. LA Times reported that Japan literally attacked Los Angeles. Did you know that the LA Times had the front page story in 1942, I believe? He said, Japan attacked Los Angeles. It was a height of anti-Japanese, anti-Asian hysteria. And Sammy Lee became the gold medalist in diving, but he was not allowed to use public swimming pool at the time. Why? Because the public swimming pool was only available to white persons only. Minorities were not allowed to use public swimming pool. You're allowed to use one day a week, either Tuesday or Wednesday, right, the day before they change the water, so it doesn't contaminate. And Sammy Lee had to practice diving the sandbag because he couldn't use the swimming pool. So he had a sandbag, so he dove into sandbag. That's how he practiced. And he became Olympic champion in gold medal. What a great American story, right? Things like that, you can include that into the classroom setting. Who are the great American heroes, Korean American heroes? We have many of them, and I include some of them into concise history book. I introduce some of the leaders, heroes and legends. And also, it's beyond my capabilities, but now students can use AI technology, certainly, right? AI. I mean, there are a lot more. Yeah, AI is killing me. Because students are submitting their papers using AI. I mean, what are you going to do? I don't know what to do, actually. So I'm ready to retire because of AI. I don't know what to do. So I eliminated, paper. I no longer require students to submit paper anymore. I chose instead. I went back to multiple choice or true false. Because no use in requiring paper because they're all using AI. Somebody else is writing for them. So anyway, but at the same time, they can be very creative using AI to document stories, right? And we have lots of different technologies that students can utilize to expand beyond what I can. I'm more traditional. When I was writing my thesis back in late 70s and 80s, early 80s even, I used IBM typewriter. I don't know if you guys remember that. IBM typewriter. I literally used the typewriter. So when they came up with IBM PC, I was so delighted because I don't have to rewrite the whole paper anymore. Back then, if you make a typo or made a mistake, you had to retype the whole thing. There was no way to correct. I'm that generation, right? So I don't ask me about AI, please. But these are some of the ways you can incorporate into classroom, right? And so let me just quickly introduce Colonel Young Kim's story and how World War II Korean War and influenced change Korean American or Young Kim and Asian Americans viewed and treated in the United States during World War II. And why is it important to study the stories of individuals like Colonel Young Kim in ethnic studies? Or Young Kim's story demonstrates how racism permeated even the U.S. military. Yet, Colonel Young Kim overcame racial divides, and what lessons can we learn from his story when it comes to racism, right? I mean, these are some of the questions you can pose and have a discussion on it. And there are many different angles we can take this Young Kim story. I mean, the story begins with, his parents came from Korea, and they were very active in independence movement. And they told Young Kim not to befriend Japanese Americans because they were fighting for Korea's independence against Japan. So he grew up learning to hate Japan, learning to disassociate with the Japanese American friends, children. But in the military, U.S. military, he became the leader of Japanese American unit known as 100th Battalion and 442nd Regimental Combat Unit. He became great war hero of Japanese Americans. How many of you actually been to Little Tokyo? Okay, great. Japanese American National Museum, right in front of the Japanese American National Museum, there is a Go for Broke monument commemorating service of Japanese Americans during World War II. Do you know who was the leader of Go for Broke Educational Foundation? Go for Broke Educational Foundation is literally Japanese American Veterans Association who fought during World War II. Chairman of Go for Broke Educational Foundation is no other than Colonel Young Kim. Korean American. That says it a lot. You know, that says it a lot. What a fascinating story. And he became the first minority battalion commander during combat in U.S. Army history during Korean War. And more importantly, he's truly a war hero, no question about it. But more importantly to me, he's a champion of civil rights. After retirement in 1972, he dedicated his life for the betterment of the community he belonged to. That's what he promised to his fellow Japanese American soldiers during World War II. He said, if I, alive of this war, I will devote my life for the betterment of the community I belong to. And he kept that promise until he passed away in 2005 here in Los Angeles. Cedars Sinai Hospital, December 29, 2005. So it's a great story, American story. It's a more than Korean American story. I think we need to have that perspective. And also, in the Korean American history, Saigu, April 29 is very important historical date. We call it Saigu, means April 29. Just like 9/11, Saigu means April 29. April 29, 1992. I remember vividly. I was teaching at Cal Poly at the time, and we had just had an inauguration of a new president, Bob Suzuki, Japanese American. And we had a keynote speaker, no other than Bill Cosby. At the time, Bill Cosby show was #1 TV show. Can you imagine? The auditorium was jam-packed. Not to celebrate Bob Suzuki, but they all wanted to see Bill Cosby, right? And after the ceremony was over, I walked into my office. As soon as I turned my office door, telephone rang. I picked it up, said, "What do you think?" Said, "What do you mean, what do you think?" "Not guilty." It was a reporter from Korea Times. And, things broke hell loose from the moment on. But what is the history of Koreatown and its formation? And how did LA 1992 unrest uprising effect transform Korean American community? And why is the Korean American experience important to understand within context of Asian American studies and U.S. history? And these are some of the questions, right? But Saigu, LA civil unrest, uprising, whatever you want to call it, it was a turning point. It was a wake-up call. It was a watershed event. And I call it Korean America was born or reborn on April 29, 1992. We did not have Korean American vocabulary until that time. Majority of Korean immigrants at the time viewed them as Koreans, Korean national. After 1992 Saigu, we began to re-identify ourselves as a Korean American. So what does it really mean to be Korean American? What does it mean? So, I think I have about 10 or 15 minutes left. So I'm going to ask, I think, is this still prize available? Okay. I was told to ask some questions. So the first question is, who is the first Korean American citizen of the United States? Does anybody know? Yes? Huh? Who? Who? Sojepil. Yeah, Philip Jason. Yes, she's correct. She's correct. His Korean name is Soje Pil, but he changed his name to Philip Jason. Philip Jason is Soje Pil backward. That's how he's Americanized his name. Soje Pil and Philip Jason. That's how he's Americanized his Korean name. But he's also the first Korean man to marry white women. Interracial marriage. He's the first. So he's the first Korean American medical doctor. You know, this is the exception to the rule. Remember that Asian Americans were ineligible to become citizens until 1952? But we didn't have a computer back then. So, you know, it was a discretion of all these local clerks in different city, county, state. So he is an educated man from the East Philadelphia, some near suburb of Philadelphia. And he married a very wealthy, very influential family, the Armstrong family, Muriel. And so he was allowed to become citizen. It's an exception to the rule, but I think, I don't know, I mean, she will give you some, I don't know. So, second question is, where is the first Koreatown in the United States? First Korean settlement in the United States? Yes? Honolulu? That's a very good guess, but unfortunately, it's not. Yes?
Riverside?
Yes, Riverside, of all places. That's where I come from. Actually, nobody knew about Riverside Koreatown until about 8 years ago. I discovered it. Pachapacat. Yeah, Pachapacat. By the way, if you, I'm sure you are not going to be able to make it, but this next Thursday, the Riverside Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California is hosting a major exhibition on Pachapacat and inland Korean American community during early 20th century. We are going to have an opening reception at 6 o'clock at the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. So if you can make it, you're all welcome to join us. It's going to be a huge celebration to commemorating the Pachapacat as the first Korean settlement in the United States. Based on my research, I was able to receive $850,000 from the Carnegie Mellon Foundation. We just finished the national tour. We started an exhibition in San Francisco last year, June, and went to Washington, D.C. in October last year. We had another exhibition in New Jersey in January this year, and in April in New York City. I just came back from Chicago in June, and finally came back to Riverside beginning in next week, July 24th. So this is going to be a major celebration of the Pachapacat, where first Korean settlement. And I'm also arguing, you know, recently the Korea underwent tremendous democratic crisis. And I'm arguing that Korea's modern democracy began at Pachapacat. That's a huge statement, right? I'm changing modern Korean history, literally, at this moment. Nobody is believing me, but I provide all the data, all the historical data. Right now, you know, Shanghai Korean Provisional Government declared democratic republicanism in 1919. And nobody knows who did it, where it came from, and how it started. Nobody knows. No Korean historians have been able to understand the historical roots. And I found their roots. that began at Pechanga camp. That's an amazing discovery, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, third question. Who is the first Korean pilot? Yes.
I believe it's George Lee.
Yes, George Lee.
156 missions.
Yes, great, thank you. Where did you get that story?
Because I'm a big World War II and World War I historian.
Oh, great, yeah.
George, I know a lot about all the African American, Asian, Japanese, Korean, all that. My brother does reenactment, so he always represents it all.
Great. Yeah, Tuskegee Airmen. So I called my book, I wrote a book about this, Willows Airmen, because it was located in the Willows, California. I borrowed the term from the Tuskegee Airmen. But in Korea, they still do not recognize George Lee as the first Korean pilot. In Korean history, they recognize Chang as the first Korean pilot. But the George Lee enlisted in the World War I in 1918 and flew more than 156 times in Europe, European front. So he should be recognized as not only first Korean American pilot, but Korean pilot, period. So we need to change the history again. They don't listen to me. Okay, finally, during World War II, many young Korean American men and women served U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force. You know, we know about the story of Colonel Young Kim in the Army, one of the greatest war hero. Susan An, the daughter of Dosanan Chang, she became the first female gunnery officer in U.S. Navy. Not just Asian American women officer, period, in U.S. Navy history. We also have Korean American men who served the U.S. Air Force. At that time, they didn't have Air Force, but they're part of the U.S. Army Air Unit, ACE. So these are some of the stories that we can share with students and talk about these stories. Anyway, let me just, I think I'm just gonna stop it and maybe have a Q&A, and I think that's better than just me talking. Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes. Pardon me? Oh, yeah. Yes, she's talking about, I published a book, in Korean language book, in 1993 to commemorate 1 year anniversary of Saigu, LA Civil Unrest, about African American history and culture. And one of the things that I found during my research, a lot of Korean immigrants really didn't understand African American community at all because they didn't know anything about what preceded before they arrived in the United States. So I decided to educate and inform Korean immigrant community about African American history, where they come from, and how their struggles for equality. And I received many letters from Korean immigrants who read the book. Some of the stories are very moving. And one lady wrote it like a 3-page handwritten letter, and she said she used to turn off the TV whenever she saw African Americans on TV. She hated it. But after reading the book, she became so passionate about understanding the African American community and understand why the riots, civil unrest erupted. And she became so fascinated, and she thanked me for helping her understand the race relations in America. Stories like that. So, you know, in fact, Radio Korea read a portion of that book every day for 5 minutes to inform and educate Korean listeners. So, I think, I helped understand, make a contribution to promoting understanding of different communities, each other. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions? Yes?
Where in Riverside is the first Koreatown?
Oh yeah, the Pachapa camp was located in downtown Riverside. Back then, the minorities, the racial minorities, and the Asian Americans were confined within such a segregated area. We practiced segregation. So it was right next to Railroad, Central Pacific Railroad, and downtown 14th, and what's the name of the street? Parker or, Parks. It's right next to freeway, 91 freeway, 14th. And across the 14th Street, this side is the Koreatown, right side is the Japanese American settlement. And the further Chinatown. And the Filipino community didn't really have the geographically defined settlement. They're the mostly seasonal farm workers moving around. Yes?
Do you have any thoughts on where the new Korean president is?